Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast. We look at unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback or $2.99 ebook download, including my latest and greatest, NYPD Behind the Blue Wall of Silence. Today's guest she just blows me away. Jennifer Buchholz is a U.S. Army veteran, cold case investigator, and founder of Break the Case, a nonprofit organization that provides collaboration between law enforcement agencies to bring justice to cold case homicide victims and their families. She also serves as professor of forensics and criminal justice at the American Military University. She also advises the university's cold case team. Jennifer Buchholz is also the co-author of a great book, Silent Silhouette: Who Killed Deborah Sue and Why. Jennifer Buchholz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I think I'm blushing a little bit with all that.
Now, I saw you do a previous interview and I was like, oh, I got to get her on my show. And then I reached out to her and you were so nice and so cooperative and I really appreciate it.
Hey, when anybody wants to talk cases, I'm there. I'm your person. I could talk cases all day long. So
okay, so before we get into solving mysteries, please just introduce yourself. Tell our listeners a little something about yourself.
Sure. Jen Buchholz is my name, and you can blame my husband for the complicated last name. He wouldn't take my last name, so I had to take his. Anyways, I actually have a link to New York City because I went to John Jay College for my master's in criminal justice back in 98, 99. And I had, during the whole year of 1999, I had what I call the best unpaid job ever because I was an intern with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in New York City and worked right alongside the death investigators. And it was the best experience of my life. And I think that really shaped my interest in homicide and death investigation. And from that point forward, I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do, or at least where I wanted to end up. But my career's kind of meandered around in different ways. And I actually did counterintelligence in the Army for many years, which I loved. And I think a lot of that skill set is actually really applicable to cold case investigations. And after the Army and I contracted for a while, I went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, did all that stuff. And then I still had that interest in forensics and death investigation. So I kind of shifted my career in that direction. And that's what I do now. I'm the cold case investigator for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office here in Colorado. And I absolutely love it. This is where I was meant to be.
As a kid, because you were young when you worked for the medical examiner's office, that must have been a real eye-opener for you.
It was fascinating, just being able to apply what I was learning in school to like actual investigations and then getting the on-scene experience and going to autopsies and helping them write reports. Like they were really great about just letting me shadow them and do everything they did. They would check my reports and stuff, but it was just super fascinating and I just couldn't get enough of it.
How did that change your outlook on life?
In terms of career?
Well, all right. So for me, when I was in the police academy, they marched us down there one day to view autopsies. And we talked about that. And I've talked about it at length on this podcast where it was like going to a Jiffy Lube and they were just cutting. And, I had been to wakes and funerals a couple of times as a young man, but watching what happens to people after they've passed and, and seeing that much death in one shot, it really was like, wow, that could happen to me. Like it wasn't a game anymore.
I do remember telling my parents, don't ever have my body autopsied if you can avoid that, because they just kind of scoop out your parts and stuff. Like, I won't get too graphic, but it was interesting to me to see. So I'd go to a death scene, right? And I'd see the person in whatever state they were found. And then the next day, usually the day after, I would go to the autopsy and then I would see what did the body tell us about what happened to them. And like the body really is, of course, like the best piece of evidence, especially in a homicide. And what does it tell us and what can we learn from it? So, and of course, like going to my first death scene, it was kind of a test in my head. I'm like, okay, how's this going to go? And I still remember the very first one I went to. It was an elderly woman who was in her 80s, I think, who just passed away naturally, but she wasn't found for several days. And this was early in the year, so it was still winter. So she didn't smell too bad, but she was very green. And I remember the officer on scene was burning coffee grounds on the stove, which I thought that smell was worse than the smell of human decomposition. Like that was terrible. But I was going to test for myself and I was fine. And I was just like, this is a total learning experience. And so I was able to just compartmentalize, and actually looking at the bodies in whatever state has never bothered me. So I guess that was a good clue too.
Did they take you out to Potter's Field?
I don't think I went there. I can't remember, honestly.
You'd remember.
I mean, I know about it, but no. Okay, then I didn't go there.
Oh, no, you would definitely, because you got to take a little ferry out there.
Oh, okay. I went to Rikers Island with one of my classes, but I had worked in a prison before that, so that didn't really bug me either. But
Well, obviously you don't scare easy, which that's a good thing
yeah,
if you're going to do this kind of work.
yeah.
You go into the military and you served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Can you explain to our listeners like your duties and responsibilities as a counterintelligence agent?
Sure. So counterintelligence mainly focuses on using humans to gather intelligence. HUMINT is the acronym that we use in the military. And so we're very heavily trained in interview and interrogation techniques. Counterintelligence, especially, well, in a war zone, you're trying to get information about your adversary, right? So like in Iraq, we're trying to figure out like, what does Saddam have up his sleeve? Who are all his, right-hand men and where are they located and all that kind of intelligence that we needed to fight the war. And so you try to find people lower down who can get access to that information for you and that will report back to you. But of course, that process is really, you have to have a lot of patience to recruit a source. And we were told, in the very beginning in training, like you're never probably going to be the one to recruit a source. You're going to be just one person along the way that helps with the process because you can't just, walk around a street corner and go into a shop and like say, hey, you want to report, intelligence to the U.S. Army? It doesn't work like that. You have to spot and assess and figure out who has the right placement and access to the information and how do we get them to work with us and how do we get them in a spot where we can trust them? Because there's a thing called double agents where they're reporting to both sides. So you're always thinking about, it's like mental gymnastics, which I use that phrase at work even now with interviews and stuff. But just the human side of things, you can imagine, is extremely complicated. But it's really fascinating learning about different human behavior and the different cultures and what's important to them and what motivates them. So I helped with the counterintelligence recruitment process, and I did have meetings with some sources who had already been recruited. So I was writing intelligence reports. And I wore a few other hats too. Like I helped with our logistics since me and my partner were outside the wire almost every single day. It only made sense for us to make logistics runs because we had teams around the country. So we would help coordinate airlifts and stuff, supplies to our outlying teams. And that actually helped my job because through that I met a lot of other people from different military units and people at the embassy, and you all just kind of help each other out. So it was a great time. I mean, that sounds weird to say, but it was my favorite part of being in the Army.
What was the training like to become a counterintelligence agent?
It's pretty stringent. You're at Fort Huachuca in Arizona for a good 6 months. And the report writing and the interview training is very difficult. And a lot of people get what they call recycled because they don't pass that portion. I did, thankfully. But you also do field exercises, regular Army stuff, putting up tents and whatever, going out in the field, going to the range. But yeah, it was a long process. And of course, training is like, okay, it sets you up, but you really have to get into the job and just get on the ground, right? And learn from your higher ups on what the job really entails.
Did you actually debrief captured Al-Qaeda or Taliban members?
In Afghanistan, I did interview a couple who had previously worked for either or. That was kind of a special mission I did for a military unit that will remain unnamed. But my team was the experts in vetting the local nationals for those that wanted to get jobs on the base. But underlying in there, we're looking for local nationals who had access to the insurgency that could report for us. In that, we did lie detector tests and lots of background research. So there was one unit that came to us a couple times. They're like, we want you to vet this particular guy. And we're pretty sure he was in Al-Qaeda or was in the Taliban. And it's okay. If he was, we need him to admit that and tell you everything that he did for them in order for us to assess whether we can trust him or not. So that was pretty interesting, talking to a couple of those guys.
Did you go to Guantanamo Bay?
I did not. No. When I was at Fort Carson in Colorado, I had several colleagues that went down there because they had a second language skill. Most of them, of course, Arabic was the main language. So they got deployed there because they could interview and interrogate in the native language, but I didn't have a language, so there was not much need for me to go there.
I also see you work for the Arizona Department of Corrections. What was your role there?
I did. So straight out of college, I was living in Arizona, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? I had a degree in criminal justice with zero experience. And so I knew Department of Corrections, like, basically, if you're living and breathing, you're probably be able to get a job there. So I was like, well, it's a stepping stone. It's something, and so I went through their little academy and worked at a maximum security prison for a couple years, which was interesting. Interacting with the inmates was really interesting, and like hearing some of their stories and their backgrounds on what they did to get themselves there. And I thought that was insightful, but it was not a career for me. I'm like, I can't do this forever.
No, it's corrections. My brother actually worked on Rikers Island for a
Oh,
couple of years
wow.
before he joined the NYPD, and it's a tough job.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous babysitting job, is what it is.
It's babysitting. That's exactly right. I mean, we had to do everything, deliver their mail and their laundry, and God, it's just like, okay, I can't.
Having to guard prisoners, not
Yeah.
in
I
corrections.
need more mental stimulation.
Yeah. Oh, you'll go crazy.
Yeah.
So counterintelligence, medical examiner's office, corrections. How did you make the pivot into cold case investigations?
It was through my job teaching, I guess, at American Military University. Several years in, I've been there since 2012. Several years in, I kind of started having this idea in my head, like, what if we could get a team of students that want to work on one particular case, and it took me a while, and I floated the idea by my boss, and we kind of brainstormed over a period of several months, and like, how could we make this work? And then eventually he just, he wrote up I can't remember what the exact wording is for the fancy documents, to establish it through the university, but he did a lot of that write-up, and, I would look at it and we go back and forth, and he got it submitted. So we do officially have a team. I'm still trying to get a website through the university or a landing page for the team. But that's kind of how it started. And then also around the same time, I took interest in this case in Arkansas that I imagine we're probably going to talk about today. And it's the case of Rebecca Gould. And I frequently would write articles for the university on different aspects of death investigation. Sometimes I would give my own analysis on a real world case. Like I did the Making a Murderer documentary on Netflix. I set out to prove that Stephen Avery was innocent, and instead I proved to myself that he did it. But it was a really interesting process writing those articles and talking to people. Anyway, so my editor at work, she's like, hey, I don't know if you've heard of this case, but it's being featured on this podcast called Hell and Gone. And so I binged it and I was hooked. And this was in very early 2019. It was around the same time I'm trying to get this volunteer team off the ground. Just kind of through a stroke of luck, I connected with this investigative journalist in Arkansas named George Jared at that time. And we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but we teamed up on that case. But he also helped me. We realized how valuable crowdsourcing was by using social media to get, citizen sleuths or whatever you want to call them. I don't like armchair detectives. I think that's kind of condescending, but citizen sleuths who have all different skill sets, but all have something to offer. And during that same time, students at the university started taking interest in the case, and I was writing a bunch of articles on it, and we just started hammering down on it. And so that's kind of how it came to be. And I think every case we go through, of course, we learn a lot of things and how to do things better and whatnot. But through forming that team, I finally also got permission to create a cold case class, which hopefully is going to be online and offered starting in 2026. So I developed that last year, and you can imagine the process of all the approval levels and stuff that has to go through for the content. But that's going to be part of this team being more official. Students that want to work with us on cases are going to have to take that class. So hopefully that'll be offered soon. And I think students are really going to enjoy it. It's a lot of work. It's project-based. It's not you take a test every week. There's no tests or anything. It's all project-based. So you can't plagiarize and you can't use AI, which drives me crazy as an instructor.
So.
But it gives you some real world skills, and I geared it to help law enforcement officials or citizens. It doesn't matter who takes it. I think it's going to give you some good skills and ideas of things to use on investigations.
Can you explain how you put your counterintelligence training to work investigating these cold cases?
Running sources.
That's the wild card with you, because it's a lot. And I'll pivot that with another question. I'll hit you with two questions. What's the biggest difference between how you would approach a case as opposed to a homicide detective that gets a cold case?
That's a tough question to answer, because, of course, every investigator has a different way of approaching a cold case, right? My background is human intelligence and using humans to figure things out. And I rely on that a lot. So in the Army, we call it running sources. And you learn, as you build a source network in a certain area, you have to be extremely careful of what you tell one person and another, and you can't reveal one source to another because you can get somebody killed. That really especially with Rebecca's case, that really played in because she was killed in this tiny town. And there were people who would come to me and George and report things, but they were like, you have to keep me anonymous. Like, my name can't get out. And of course, I'm trained in that. Like, yeah, no problem. But I see that mistake get made on other cases where people are outing people and doxing them and putting their personal names. It's like, you can't do that. You have to keep everybody very compartmentalized and separate. Yeah. So I actually keep a spreadsheet now for each case, and this is at work or through my nonprofit, but I have a spreadsheet for each case, and it's the person, who I've talked to, when I talk to them, the context of the conversation, what's their contact information, are they willing to talk again, do I have an audio recording? Like, I keep a very detailed spreadsheet for each case, and that has been super helpful for me referring back, because you can't remember everybody you talk to, and you're like, wait, let me check if I have that name on my list. Oh, sure enough, I did talk to them. Oh, let me go back and listen to my recording with them, So that's been a really helpful tactic that carried over from counterintelligence to cold case investigations.
Well, can you go into the Rebecca Gould homicide case and how you solved it?
Well, I can't take credit for solving it. I think we played a part along the way, as did many people. So Rebecca Gould, she was a 22-year-old college student, and she was murdered in her boyfriend's house in 2004, September 20th. Well, 19th or 20th, we actually don't know which day. And her body was removed from the primary crime scene and moved and dumped off an embankment about 7 or 8 miles away from the house. Then someone attempted to do a cleanup of the home, although it was not a good cleanup. But this is what really caught my interest when I first heard the case. I'm like, wait, there's some major behavioral aspects here that I think are being ignored by the police. And it was clear the investigator didn't think there was any relevance or importance to the fact that her body was moved and somebody tried to clean the scene. But I know from my experience, usually that indicates a personal relationship between the victim and killer. And so that right there can narrow down your pool of suspects. But the issue was they had this investigator on the case from the Arkansas State Police who had this false theory that her murder was a result of a drug deal gone wrong, and that this local guy who was into drugs at the time was responsible. Well, through my research, I'm like, this guy didn't even know where her boyfriend lived. It was this remote trailer out in the woods. Like, you have to know where it is to find it. You don't stumble across it. He had told investigators he'd never been to that house. He didn't know where it was. And I'm like, someone spent a great deal of time in this crime scene, so they're going to leave DNA or hair or something of themselves. And obviously they hadn't found his DNA or hair or prints or anything, or he would have been arrested. And so I kind of figured right off the bat that this theory was completely wrong. And that was something me and George connected on right away, because he had covered the case for years and in fact had been present when her body was discovered. It was the first homicide case that he wrote about as a journalist. So you can imagine, it just stuck with him through the years. And anyways, so I heard him on this Hell and Gone podcast, and I'm like, well, he's a subject matter expert. I really want to write about this case and the behavioral aspects. I'm going to reach out to him, but if he doesn't answer me and just whatever. Well, he called me 15 minutes after I sent an email, and we talked for 3 hours and 22 minutes. And it was like...
lifelong friends now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like an investigative partnership, made in heaven, I guess. And we really bonded over the case, and I just couldn't let it go. I'm like, this is solvable. They're in the wrong direction. How do we fix this? How do we have a positive impact? So over the coming months, I traveled to Arkansas so I could see the key locations in person. I met Rebecca's dad. We sat down for many hours. He and I actually filed a complaint with the FBI against this investigator, because the Arkansas State Police would not put a new person on the case or even do a review of it. We had an offer from the VDOC Society to I don't know if you've heard of them, you probably have, no. But so they're a group of retired forensic and law enforcement experts. So people like Jim Fitzgerald, who's credited with catching the Unabomber, he's a member. And they do a case review once a month they only work with law enforcement. And it's completely free to the agency. They pay for all expenses. And this group of experts sits down, gets a presentation from the agency on the case, and then, it's like a group think, like a big brainstorming session on other actions that can be taken. ASP refused to present it there. We're throwing all these ideas at them, trying to help them, and they just refused to do anything. So anyways, later in 2019, George goes, I think we need to start a Facebook group. And I was resisting because I'm like, I don't want to do, like we were talking about earlier before we started recording, I don't want to be wrangling cats and, dealing with all those crazies. But he convinced me to do it. And so we started the group, Unsolved Murder of Rebecca Gould. It's still out there. It will be out there forever. If people want to waste a lot of hours of their time, you can go through that group and go all the way back to 2019. And so shortly after we started the group, a guy named William Miller joined, like within a month. And thankfully, one of our crowdsourcing team members had mapped Rebecca's boyfriend's entire family tree. And so when this guy joined, she goes, hey, by the way, that's Casey's first cousin. So Casey was the boyfriend.
So he doesn't even know that he's on the radar of being a relative.
No.
All
I'm
right.
like, well, that's interesting. Okay, so we'll just keep that in the back of our minds and see what he does. So this guy, he waited a little while, a couple months, I think, but then he started kind of chiming in on a couple of the discussion posts and posted a couple theories and was asking some questions. And I'm like, okay, well, we had done our research on him. And in 2004, William Miller lived in Texas, about 12 hours away, and he had a wife and a little kid. And so we had no reason to think he had any involvement. So we figured, oh, he must be a mole for Casey's family, because we were pretty convinced that somebody in this boyfriend's family was responsible. I mean, who else is cleaning up a crime scene and, I mean, moving a body and going to all this trouble? So, okay, this is interesting. Anyways, to go along. So in January of 2020, William Miller messages me directly through Facebook Messenger. And the first thing he sent was a clip of a newspaper article that was talking about Casey's neighbors hearing screams somewhere around the time of the murder. And he's like, hey, just trying to help out. I wondered if you'd seen this article. Yeah. I wonder if you could interview the neighbors. And I think he was trying to figure out if I had got a hold of the neighbors, and I had got a hold of one, but I wasn't going to tell him that. And I'm like, oh yeah, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it. And this is what I do with everybody. Like, no message goes unanswered. So we started a dialogue, and, I'm telling George, I'm like, okay, he's got to just be trying to get information out of us to pass to the family. I mean, I don't know what else what other reason he's got. And months go on through 2020, and his Facebook says he lives in the Philippines. So we're talking about that. And I'm like, oh, are you an expat? You former military? So he's telling me about, his family. No, I met a woman here and got married, and we have 2 kids. And so that dialogue continues. And he continues posting comments in the Facebook group. And anyways, something else significant that happened in 2020 is finally the ASP put a new detective on the case. And that guy, now we know, but he started all the way back at the beginning. And later on, he made the comment after an arrest. He made the comment, I started with Casey's family, and I had 6 males from that family on my list. And William Miller was number 6. And anyways, so that detective was better. He would communicate with me and George and others some. He wouldn't share much, but I'm like, at least someone's listening to the information that we're passing. And he was in our Facebook group under a fake profile. So he was there lurking, which is great, watching what's going on. And the piece of information we didn't have that he had is that William Miller was in town the weekend of Rebecca's murder. So he knew that because I had been in the case file from almost day one. And so he's in our Facebook group watching this guy interact and how he's interacting, and I guess obviously found it suspicious. And in the meantime, George and I are continuing our own investigation. And in September of 2020, I got a message from someone, and they put me in touch with another person who said, I just want to let you know that Casey's cousin was in town the weekend of the murder. And I'm like, what? Because we didn't know this yet. And that was a magic tip. And so, of course, you can imagine that shifted our entire focus. The thing was, William has a younger brother, Jeremy. So we didn't know which cousin might have been involved, or both, or what. So now we're scrambling. We're like doing all this background research on both of them and like going through their social media and trying to dig up anything we can without tipping them off that now we know they were in town. Well, around the same time, the detective went out to Oregon, where these 2 guys are living, and interviewed them and got a confession out of William Miller. And that was on November 7th of 2020. So out of the blue, we get a call on November 8th from Rebecca's dad. And he's like, you can't tell anybody, but they made an arrest. But we were kind of bewildered. We're like, it's got to be one of these 2, but which one is it?
Which one?
Anyways, ended up being the older one. And what's really alarming about the confession is not only did he confess to Rebecca's murder, but he confessed to killing 5 other women. And so what really, really bothers us, of course, about that is that if the lead had been followed in the very beginning in 2004 and he'd been discovered, other women's lives probably could have been saved. And that resonates with me and George a lot, and a lot of other people. William's name had been in the case file from the very beginning. He had come to town to visit his mom and brother who were living in the local area, And then they literally packed up their entire house and moved back to Texas the day after Rebecca went missing. And for some reason, nobody thought that was suspicious.
There was another thing with this case that I saw, that there was something with the timeline of when Rebecca was murdered, and the police, they got it wrong, or they knew it was wrong and left it out there with the timeline, right?
Yes. So they led everybody to believe that she was on video at a convenience store on Monday morning, September 20th of 2004. Once this case was adjudicated and we got the case file, we found out there was no video at all. And the only thing that placed her there was the clerk, who thought Rebecca had come in Monday morning, but we had already made contact with the clerk long before we got the case file, years prior. And she had also worked Sunday, so she wasn't sure what day she saw Rebecca. And so we had no proof of life for her on Monday morning. And I'm not saying she was not alive Monday morning. This may have happened Monday, but they never looked or examined the theory that maybe she was killed Sunday night. And nobody has an alibi for Sunday night, and we have no proof of life for her past about 9 p.m. on Sunday night. And so to this day, we still don't know, because William, although he confessed, he said things that could not be true, part of it being the timeline Monday morning. And so we don't have that answer. But spoiler alert, I reestablished contact with William after he went to prison. I don't know why he still talks to me, probably because I'm a female and nobody goes to visit.
Probably.
Yeah, I'll use it, whatever. So I've been to the prison, I think 4 times to meet with him. We communicate over the JPay messages that you can send back and forth to inmates, but I still don't have all the answers. But I'm never going to give up. He and I are about the same age, barring some major medical catastrophe. I have many years left, and so does he, and so I'm just going to keep working with him and try to get the full truth and identify his other victims. That's our primary focus now.
I forget if it was your organization's webpage or the Facebook group you have, and I was reading, you can read the messages that he's instant messaging you. And, well, first off, he's illiterate, but let's get past that. And the way you handled him was amazing, because he said something. I knew what you were doing. You were trying to figure out, was he in the area? And you asked him something, and he says, well, I've been to all 50 states.
Yes.
And you didn't even blink. You just went right past it, not to scare him away. I thought, and I encourage people, I'll have the links up and stuff. You can read all this stuff, and, his instant messages to Jennifer, and then him just throwing these red herrings out there while he's trying to figure out what's going on. Was the Arkansas authorities, after the arrest and the conviction, did they appreciate your efforts? Or did they feel, or do you think that they felt they were shown up?
The original detective, the one that botched it and accused an innocent guy for 14 years, he absolutely hates us. I only talked to him one time on the phone, and he was so abrasive. He was so difficult to talk to. He's so egotistical. All he wanted to do is talk about his time in the Marine Corps in Iraq. I'm like, yeah, I've done all that too. Just because I'm a girl doesn't mean, it was like talking to a brick wall. So then the next detective, the one who did, Mike McNeil was his name, the one who solved the case, the one who was okay at communication with us, I asked, after it was all said and done, Rebecca's dad asked him if he would please sit down with me and George, because we wanted to understand what we did that helped him, that assisted the case, and if there was things we did that not set it back, but maybe weren't as good. And he refused. He actually told the victim's father, this case has really worn on me and I need to put it away. I'm like, wow, okay. So, and I'm like, I work in law enforcement now, couldn't even do me the courtesy of having a conversation. And I mean, there's a whole lot more to it, but through the course of our own investigation into William's other potential victims, which the ASP has done nothing about, they just decided he was lying. We befriended William's younger brother, Jeremy. One day, a couple years ago, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, my brother's laptop is still sitting in my safe, but I don't think it works, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And I'm like, so could I just check it maybe? My husband's pretty techie, maybe. So he mailed it to me, and which is just, and we had this big debate, me, Rebecca's dad, and George. Do I take it because we're definitely breaking the chain of custody? It can never be used in court, but we don't want it destroyed. They should have seized it. I couldn't believe they didn't seize his digital devices.
But it's a potential serial killer case. Can't you give it to the FBI?
Good question. I don't know.
Oh, I think that, well, now they might run with it.
I feel like the ASP would have to put that in motion, not us, because we're not the investigating agency, but I really don't know. I mean, we've contacted the ASP multiple times about this, and Well, anyways, I get this laptop, right? And sure as shit, like it's not something going on with the BIOS and you can't log in right, whatever. Anyways, my husband, like I said, is super techie. He takes the hard drive out. He figures out how to get into it. And I'm on the phone with George while he's doing this. And he's like, you're not going to want to see that. You're not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? And so not
Child porn.
only are there tons of child porn. Well,
That's why he's in the Philippines.
yeah. Not only was there a ton of screenshots of Rebecca's case and the stuff we were doing on it, and my articles and messages with me and stuff, there's screenshots of 2 other women's cases that are still unsolved. And one is so ridiculously similar to Rebecca's, down to the detail that this girl was abducted on the same day that Rebecca was killed, just a different year. And if George has literally done this in presentations, he puts this other girl's photo, and the victim's name is Elaine Nix. It's out of Georgia, Gwinnett County, Georgia. It's a case from 1999. She went missing on September 20th, 1999. Becca went missing on September 20th, 2004. If you put them side by side, they look like they could be twins, or at least sisters. They're the same stature, they're blonde, very petite. And in Williams' confessions, he said he abducted one girl from a payphone. And Elaine was abducted from a payphone at a gas station and found 8 days later. And I've tried to give this information to the Arkansas State Police, and they will not take it. They will not listen. They will not entertain it. So we're like, what do we do?
Have you reached out to the cops in Georgia?
Yes. So I called their investigations unit and talked to the sergeant. He seemed extremely interested in what we had. Never heard back from him. So then George reached out to the district attorney, and they've had several conversations, and she has basically instructed the detective on the case to talk with us, and he has yet to get in contact with us. So it's a brick wall. It's like everywhere we turn, I don't know what the deal is, but we just continue to do what we can to try to use the information William gave in his confessions to try to identify other potential victims. And then from there, we'll have to contact those agencies, I guess, directly and see if they'll talk with us about what we have. It's been a big fight.
I mean, having worked in law enforcement for 20 years, and I told you this before we started recording, I wouldn't say I was skeptical when I heard about your organization, but I didn't understand it. And then I just started, and I go, what could it hurt? You guys aren't trespassing through a crime scene. You're coming after the fact. You're gathering intelligence, because detectives, they get a case, they can't work on it forever.
Right.
Other cases are coming in, and stuff gets thrown in a box. Not to monopolize your time, but I got a similar story. And this is my department. I was retired probably about 10 years. And I'm always online looking at old homicides and old missing persons cases. And I see a homicide that happened in Manhattan that lines up with a group of guys that we locked up, the murder for hire business. And they were also doing robberies. And I said, and it was the guys were on motorcycles. And I go, I know who did this. Well, I'm pretty damn sure the guys that did this. So I call the precinct. Now, I'm NYPD, so I call the precinct. I get the squad sergeant on the phone. He tells me the homicide unit has it. They don't have the case. I call the homicide unit, and they basically blew me off. So I was like, and this is me calling my department.
Exactly. Yeah. It's frustrating, especially when I'm like, and I don't know if me introducing myself as being in law enforcement is the good side of the knife or it's a double-edged sword, because
it is a double-edged sword.
I think they view me as competition, which is not at all what we're there for. We're there to augment. So sometimes it helps and sometimes not. But then when you say, well, I'm a instructor of forensics, they don't want to hear that either. Oh, you're just a civilian. So it's like you can't win. But I mean, a long-term goal of ours is how do we bridge this gap? Because with 300,000 unsolved homicides, law enforcement's never going to be able to do it on their own. They're going to have to accept help at some point, and we have the skill set, to lure people out.
You did a hell of a job with this one.
I mean, we didn't even mean to on that one, but now we're like, oh, we'll keep that in the back of our mind for all future cases. And so even the case where our team's working on now, we have a Facebook group, Unsolved Murder of Linda Malcolm. A couple of suspects are in there, we're like, good.
Well, I want to pivot. You and your partner wrote a book about a case you're working on, and I'm going to post the link on it. It's called Silent Silhouette, Who Killed Deborah Sue and Why. Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So that was the second case George and I teamed up on with others. So Deborah Sue, Debbie, she was killed on August 24th, 1975 in Lubbock, Texas. She was stabbed to death in her carport of her home, and then her body was dragged to the back step of that home about 25 feet or so. She was newly married. Her husband has a solid alibi. He was definitely at work all night. Well, anyways, this was another case that was submitted to us back in, Rebecca's was in limbo because we're waiting on trial. So I guess it was 2021 this case got submitted to us. And we're kind of looking to team up on another one. And it appealed to us. I hate saying that, but it appealed to us because nothing had been done for a long time. And again, you have these behavioral actions going on. Like, why is somebody dragging her body to the back step? And why are they partially disrobing her? Was this actually a sexual assault or what? And again, I don't think the detectives had looked at it from that point of view. So anyways, we ended up taking the case, and George and I went down to Lubbock, Texas for a week on the 46th anniversary of her murder. And we always go to the location or the city where the person was murdered before we ever make any public announcement that we're going to take the case, because we like to poke around. And if we have a suspect in mind, maybe we can go talk to them without them knowing anything, and on and on. But also, the advantage is the house where Debbie was killed is just like it was in 1975. There's almost no differences and no upgrades. And so we knocked on the door and met the resident that lives there now, and he was really accommodating. And so we told him, we want to come here on the anniversary of the murder at around the same time of night that it occurred. And he's like, no problem. And so we went there on that Tuesday night, and that year was a Tuesday, but she was killed on a Sunday. And we went there around 9:30 at night. And what really struck us, this is why it's so important, go to the scene. It was pitch black. And this is just, in this day and age, we could not see into the carport or the backyard. And there had been no light in the carport back in 1975. The only exterior light had been outside that back screen door where her body was found. So right away, we're like, I don't think this is a stranger that just wandered into this pitch black carport. They had to have been here before. Yeah, they had to have been here before and knew the layout. And also in the backyard, between the carport and the back door, was this metal, back in the day, was a metal table and 4 metal chairs. If you don't know that's there, you're going to trip right over it and make one hell of a noise, So right away, we're like, this is someone who's been to this house before, and they've been here at night. And so that, for us, pretty much eliminated the stranger theory that a lot of people floated. Anyways, it was so instructive because we took video at night so that we could illustrate to the rest of the team and followers how dark it is. He let us in the house at night so we could, try to experience exactly what Debbie heard and saw, kind of did some crime scene reconstruction. It was so valuable. And it just, the more details you can put together about how the crime occurred, just get so many more clues about the relationship between the victim and killer, and who the killer probably is. And of course, we used our, lessons learned from Rebecca's case on this one, and with the Facebook group and everything. Unfortunately, that case derailed because one of Debbie's relatives went off the rails on us. She did not like, what was it? Oh, CrimeCon was helping us. They put together this cold case club thing online where me and George would host weekly live Zoom sessions on different aspects of the case, bring in different experts, interview them, and then the audience can interact with us and the experts, and we can all kind of brainstorm through it. Well, as part of that process, their producers asked for some certain parts of the case file, like the autopsy, because I can't have a death investigator on talking about a case where they haven't read the autopsy. And I had actually already had a death investigator on my podcast talking about the autopsy, so I didn't think it was an issue. Well, she found out that I shared those pages of the original case file and just went off on us and derailed that entire process. And CrimeCon ended up having to cancel us, and because she threatened to sue. And so the case sits unsolved. It's been 50 years now, which really breaks my heart. I think it's totally solvable. There's 2 top suspects that made themselves into top suspects, and they're both still alive, and neither one's been interviewed by police since the day after the murder. So there's some really easy steps that Lubbock PD could take to try to get information or, check on consistency in stories and stuff like that. And I think because the one person doesn't support us anymore, they're just like, we're not going to deal with this drama. But that aside, the book gives readers a really good look into our investigation. There's a few things that we can't reveal yet until hopefully there's an arrest. But it just gives a good idea of our process and methodology. And we were hoping other investigators would read it and it would give them ideas on what might work for their case, or even citizen sleuths that want to work on a case. And so we go into some of our tactics and tradecraft, I guess you could call it. And I do have Oh, sorry. I was just going to say,
No.
there's one, I'm rambling on here, but
No, you're fine.
there is one chapter in there about the Rebecca Gould case. Just a quick snapshot of what I told you here earlier, but one chapter just kind of comparing and reflecting and stuff on what we learned from working on her case.
But didn't this 1975 murder of Debbie Sue Williamson, it kind of got derailed or went in the wrong direction because I don't know if they tried to pin it on Henry Lee Lucas, or Henry Lee Lucas was a serial killer and the Texas authorities believed everything this guy told him.
Yeah.
And he took credit for like 500 or 600 murders, which he couldn't have possibly.
It was impossible. Exactly.
And, I mean, his buddy, his tool is a serial killer, but not 500 bodies on him. And they screwed up so many homicide investigations. How did his name get thrown in the mix with this case?
He, in 1984, because the Texas Rangers were flying him around and getting him to confess
Saw that
to
documentary.
all these murders. Debbie Sue's came up as one, and he ended up confessing to it. And what's interesting is it's actually Debbie's parents who proved that he couldn't be their daughter's killer, because he gave certain details about how he got in the house and stuff that were impossible. And they're like, this can't be. Like, this is not a true confession. And so it was her parents that actually proved that he was not the correct suspect in her case, and that really pissed off the Texas Rangers and Lubbock PD also. And I think that's another, they're like, oh, we have this big black guy in the past. Well, oh my gosh, it's 40 years ago, like, let it go. Let's just do right by the victim.
Well, Henry Lee Lucas, I mean, he was no criminal mastermind.
No.
It just was the Texas Rangers and a lot of the municipalities in Texas. They were so willing to believe this guy. Everything they did went against police work.
Yes.
It's like they would walk in, they'd go in to see him and would hold a photo up of a woman and go, did you kill her? And he goes, sure. Can I have a cheeseburger?
Exactly.
And he would write out a confession, and it's like, well, you said it was on this side of the road. Oh, did I? It's on that side of the road. And it was just, they just wanted to clear these cases.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. It was bungled, but that's such a different team of people from then to now. And it's like, there's no reflection on the current detectives or the department itself. Like, we have to set our ego aside. I don't know how we get agencies to do that.
That's going to be your biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
That's going to be your biggest hurdle in law enforcement. I mean, I've been guilty of it too. With different agencies where we just didn't want to work with them. And I get it. It just turns into a pissing contest.
Right.
Your organization, breakthecase.org, is also investigating the 2002 disappearance of Eric Ray Brazil, who disappeared in Springfield, Oregon. You got anything on that?
So we met this wonderful woman named Patricia last year at a conference George and I did. Of course, we're talking cases, over drinks or whatever. And she's telling us about, she's working just by herself, basically. She's working on this case of a friend of hers from college who went missing, Eric Brazil, as you just said. George and I traditionally, we don't take missing persons cases. I just don't think we have the resources, and we usually take cases not where we live. So it's like, with missing persons, you got to do a lot of traveling if you're going to do searches and stuff. And it's not like we make any money or have the funding to do that. So for the most part, we just don't do missing persons cases. But with her, she was so motivated, and she just reminded me of myself. Like, she's just taking this on by herself. The investigating agency thinks he went into the woods and committed suicide. That's their theory, even though they can't prove any of it. So they're not working it. And so we just said, what can we do to help? And so we helped a lot in the background with logistics of her going and organizing a search and like a local like meet and greet up there in Oregon. And unfortunately, the search, as predicted, did not reveal or find any remains, but she can also mark off certain areas now as being cleared. Basically, we've been helping her in terms of like her Facebook page and making contacts with people who knew him and kind of helping her with that source network type thing and working through different theories. And she's putting a podcast together for it. So that's mostly her area of expertise and what she's working on. And George and I are just sort of outliers trying to help when we can. But it's not like our team's, I guess, the primary case that our whole team is working on. But we really like the work she does and support her. And I think anybody that wants to take on the case of their missing friend, the victim deserves it and needs somebody to advocate for them.
I saw a photo of you with cold case investigator Paul Holes.
Yeah.
Who was the lead investigator. He solved the Golden State Killer investigation. He had a documentary, and the reason I want to ask you is because you're in Colorado, right?
Yes, I am.
So I watched one of his documentaries, and he was working on this case, and I found it fascinating about this guy Oki Albert Al Kite from Aurora,
Yes.
Colorado. So the guy owned
Yeah.
the guy owned a house, and this guy, he had an apartment for rent, and a guy showed up, rented the apartment, and within a couple of weeks, the owner, this Oki Albert Al Kite, is found in that apartment, tortured. I mean,
Yes.
just hogtied, stabbed to death, tortured. And what they surmise is the person that did this is a mercenary from another country because of the way he was tied up. The DNA comes back to like the Eastern Bloc, and the guy definitely had intelligence training, because when he was very careful when he went to look at the apartment. The guy had made a comment about it. I thought he was wearing like a rug, and the guy spoke with an accent and pretended he had a cane, limped with a cane and everything. And like, someone half crippled could not have done this to this guy, and all the documents to rent the apartment were bogus, and this guy didn't have an enemy in the world. So it's some sick person that wanted to torture. You should look into that. I mean, that's a fascinating case.
I actually had that case submitted to us about 2 weeks ago. We keep a running spreadsheet of case submissions, but that one I'm like, I'm not sure we can.
Oh, you gotta watch. You gotta see. If I can find the video for that, I'll send it to you.
I didn't know
it's
Paul consulted on that or did something on it. That would be interesting.
Yeah, he had a show. He had a series on for a short time about 3 years ago.
Okay,
and that was one of the episodes. I'll find it and send it to you.
Yeah. He's great, so I can't say too much, but I was able to bring him in on a case at our agency, and he's helped us for over a year now on that particular case. So I've been really thankful for his expertise and connections, and we're hoping, Othram, who he works for now, can help us with I call it a very difficult DNA situation that we have going on. But yeah, he's very kind, and I just love his brain. I'm like, can I know everything that's in your brain about investigations?
So your organization is breakthecase.org. How many members do you have?
Right now we have 6 official team members, and we're small. We're very small. So we pretty much just take one primary case at a time. The one we've been working on for the last 3 years now is that of Linda Malcolm out of Port Orchard, Washington. We're getting to the point where we feel like we've kind of exhausted all our resources on her case, and without further direction from the investigating agency, we're sort of stuck. We're not really stuck, but there's always something to do. But I'm like, I'm throwing darts. It's several suspects. Like, can you, so we're trying to work with them to get some direction. But we did start taking case submissions recently, which we'll work through over the next few months and research and hopefully start a new investigation sometime next year. But, we're not fast, we're slow. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But our philosophy is one case at a time, because we want to dedicate everything we have to that one case and make sure that victim and their family gets a very thorough as possible of an investigation as we can do. We can never promise an arrest, but at least we can promise we'll do everything we possibly can to get you answers. And so I kind of have a dream of having teams all over the country, each one working one case at a time. But we have found it's really difficult to find volunteers that are going to stick with it. Like, everybody wants to solve a cold case, and I get a ton of emails like, I want to be a volunteer, and I keep a spreadsheet for that too. But you give them a task, and then like a week later, they're like, this is kind of tedious, and they fall off, I'm like, they are tedious, and some of it is boring. It's not all just knocking on doors and stuff like that. There's a lot more behind the scenes, but that's how you have to work the case correctly. So we'll see. I don't know if that will develop someday, but at least for now, we can help.
I went on your website. You've got an impressive team. You got a licensed drone pilot, which that's invaluable, a genealogist, an arson investigator. I mean, you're definitely headed in the right direction.
Yeah. And we have other experts that consult with us on the periphery. They're not full-time members, but like, we have a knife expert. I'm actually the genealogy. I went through certification to do the genealogy, because we have a couple cases at work that I think at some point are going to need that. And so I want to be able to just do it in-house without them having to spend money. So I'm happy to help other agencies with their genealogy if they need assistance. But yeah, we have a knife expert. I have DNA experts that we can call on, like Paul Holes. We need to ask him about something. We have a group of FBI retired profilers we can ask. So we try to collect these experts as we go along for people. When we need an expert in a particular area, we can provide that to the law enforcement agency. But they're not full-time members because they don't have time. But it's been humbling how many people have helped us along the way. So it's been great.
And your organization's a nonprofit, and
Yeah.
I'm sure donations are welcome to fund the research on these cases, the travel, the tools. And so where can my listeners find your website and make a donation and follow these great cases you're working on?
And let me preface, a couple years ago, George and I are like, we need a website. We need a landing page for our casework so that when we go to an agency or family, we can say, just go to this site and you can see the kind of work we do. I did not want to do a nonprofit. I'm not a business person. I hate business. It's not my thing. But we were like, well, if we have a website, we have to have a name. And if we have a name, how do we do this? So I did some research on Break the Case because that's the name of the podcast the university puts out that we're on. It's a serial type where each season's a different case. So I went looking and I was like, well, Break the Case is not taken as a nonprofit or as a website. And so we ended up just going with that. And that's the reason we ended up with a nonprofit. It's not to raise money. Yes, there is a way to make donations. And if you do make a donation, you can pick from a drop-down menu of where you want your money to go. So we encourage people to donate to the victims' reward funds that we bring to every case. And then there is a option for like team travel and resources, I think it's called. So we wanted to empower people to choose where their donation goes if they do choose to donate, but we don't solicit donations. Like, we've always been self-funded. It actually doesn't cost a ton of money for what we do. It's more time than anything. And then I also tell people, like, if you want to donate, right now you can donate to Linda's reward fund. If in the end there's an arrest and we don't pay out the reward, I'll refund your money, or you can pay it forward to another victim's reward fund. But again, we wanted to empower people to choose what their money goes towards. So just put that
And that
up.
goes for your book too, right? All the proceeds from your book?
Yeah. The proceeds from our book sale go into usually the reward fund for victims. Because we always start with $5,000 for every case we take on. And that's out of our own money. Like, we don't ever ask a victim's family for money. We won't take their money. I just won't. We don't have contracts and stuff like that. Just a little memorandum of understanding that everybody signs. So that's kind of how that works.
And where can people find, what's the name of your book again, and where can people find it?
So the book on Debbie's case is called Silent Silhouette, and you see my name, Jen Buchholz, and George Jared's name on the cover. It's on Amazon. I don't remember what he has it listed at. $10 or something. It's not horribly outrageous. And then our website is breakthecase.org. You can check out all of our work on the different homicide cases we've worked. And if you're interested in volunteering, you can just shoot me a message through the submission form on the website, or you can always email me at info@breakthecase.org. And if you have a case you want us to consider for our next investigation, you can submit that to me as well, and I'll add it to our spreadsheet.
Jennifer Buchholz, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. It was really nice getting to know you.
Thank you. And as always, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Dublin, Ireland, St. Mary's, Ontario, Belmore, New York, Honolulu, Hawaii, and University Place, Washington. If you work in law enforcement or had an interest in criminal background, drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. And if you enjoyed the content, check out my Amazon author page. Type in my name, Vic, Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my NYPD books for free. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you next week.